Every time I write music, I'm like, do people need this? Like, why am I? They're already cluttered with stuff. Well, sometimes they say they do, and that's all I need to hear.
Hello everybody, it's Dean Wolfe. Welcome to the Prog Dog channel. Today I have a special guest, Adam Elk, and he is a member of the Mommyheads. And we're talking to him. I'm taking an educated guess. I think you're in your New York studio, is that correct?
Yeah, and one of my speakers is about to feed back, so I just turned it off. It usually
okay.
goes.
I just wrote a review of your latest album, Coney Island Kid, and I did a video review as well. I don't know, have you seen them or
I
read it?
haven't actually. I'm excited
Okay.
to see it.
Okay. Well, I guess you could check it after the video. I scored your album 4 bones out of 5 bones. That's the Prog Dog score system. And
A lot of bones.
yeah, a lot of bones. I think it's a really a fine album. I was curious what your connections with prog rock are, because I did come across a video of yours. You did a cover of Three of a Perfect Pair. I think it was a
We
King
also did
Crimson.
frame by frame.
Oh,
There's
frame
both.
by frame.
Yeah, we did both. We tried.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I thought it was very successful.
Oh,
Nicely
cool.
done. Yeah. Listening to the album, it's not, I wouldn't call it, I didn't kind of classify it as a strictly prog album, but I could see the influences. I could hear the influences. And I was just wondering if we could extricate a little bit, what are your influences as far as prog rock?
Yeah, we've always been an anomaly. We've been a band that has kind of like we've never fit into any one particular genre, or because we approach music as fans and we're fans of anything we deem good. So I felt like when I was growing up, there were fans of progressive rock and they couldn't stand pop, and then there were pop fans. It was like the mods versus the rockers in Quadrophenia. Like,
Yeah.
you sure you don't want to get off your moped and try a Harley? Like, you might have fun, or these little windy streets are small. Why don't you get off your Harley and try the moped, big leather bound rocker? And so we treated it like we were fans, and therefore we kind of hurt ourselves because we never fit into a swarm of fish that just pivot, or when you see birds in the sky, thousands of them, and they just kind of go like that. We were always like going the other way. So a lot of people didn't hear of us because they're huge cracks. And so we started in the mid 80s as a high school band. It was very XTC driven, very Tears for Fears, very Gang of Four, very Talking Heads. Mommyheads, I think, is a cross between Mothers of Invention and Talking Heads. We played CB's all the time. We met there. We all love the same types of music, late 70s New York, new wave and punk and English. And then towards the early 90s, we would do extended jams and solos, and we became better at our instruments. And people would come up to me and say, "You sound very Prague." And I thought they meant Prague, Czechoslovakia. I didn't even know what they were talking about. So we were getting that from musicians because we were proficient. We weren't just 4 chords and let's pick up chicks after. So we actually practice our instruments, and we were getting that for the longest time. But Prague in the 80s was taken over by DX7s and digital synths, and it got very it lost its analog richness from the early 70s and became very mathematical. I felt like, aside from Yes, with a couple of things in the 80s, it lost the songwriting capabilities that I loved, grew up loving. It felt a little bored of itself in the 80s. It needed the reinvention, like with Tool, et cetera, Dream Theater. But I also feel like from the 70s on, the art of the song was a little lost in progressive music, and it became more about how many time changes can we do and how many more dudes can we fit in the audience, like my age, and not cross-pollinate and sing about something other than mystical stuff, or like sing about heartache and things that you feel in your chest, to cross-pollinate between men and women in the audience. And if you still go to certain prog shows, it's all guys. So people were more blown away with Rush. Technically, I want to play like Neil Peart. I want to play like Geddy Lee. I want, and so I want to be able to use my feet on the synth and play and sing. And if I can do that, I'll be great. Not thinking there were songs behind moving pictures. So we kind of lost our interest in progressive music for a good long time.
So did I.
Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
like, why? Like, I can't hum it. Why care? It's just noodling. So, and then we broke up. We were on Geffen. They dropped us in '97. We had a huge deal produced by Don Was. We had two A&R guys. One had the Counting Crows with Peter Gabriel. The other guy had Weezer and Guns N' Roses. And we just got lost there. We didn't have a genre. We weren't No Depression. We weren't rock or metal. We weren't AOR. We weren't anything. So we got dropped and broke up. And 10 years later, Swede started calling us saying, you need to come to Sweden because we think you're still around. And we made it to Sweden and realized boxes of those Geffen CDs made it to Sweden. They never dropped us in Sweden. Geffen Sweden just kept promoting us because they liked the music. And that's where we embraced that we were prog, progressive pop or baroque, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And we just got back from Sweden. We played 10 shows. It was amazing. We go every other year. We've been there 7 or 8 times, and somehow life has been breathed back into this band that fell through the cracks.
Tell me a little about your recent tour there in Sweden.
It's amazing. The audience is, college is free, so the audience is literate. Just, I always joke the TSA agent over there has a doctorate in something. That's just how it is in these countries. There's under 10 million people, and there's a lot of guys our age that love, Heart of the Sunrise, and they've based their lives off certain songs, and they haven't needed to change from their childhood, their internal childhood trajectory. If they were 10 and they heard Fragile, they heard early Crimson, the need to have to work 5 jobs a day, Uber at night, get your master's, pay for insurance, they somehow they haven't lost that connection to who they were, that inspiration in the beginning, because their country just takes care of them. It's plain and simple. It's not paradise by any means, but there are certain baseline things that are met over there where a band like ours, which is hard to get at first listen, it takes 10 listens. They have time for the 10 listens. And so they're not rushed to the next, they're not always rushing. And countries like that embrace us. And so the 10 shows were amazing. We sign autographs. People get in lines for us to, sign autographs on we have a label that just makes LPs. They don't make anything. They don't make CDs, cassettes, 8-track. It's just LPs. They're beautiful. They're heavy. They're gorgeous. We've done 6 with them already. And when that kind of soil is that rich, and the sun is beating down, and the rain hits when it needs to, artistically, the artist will grow. And not feel like they're being stamped out of society at every turn, but actually they're being nurtured. And it's 10 shows of wonderfulness, really.
So let's talk a little about your new album. The songwriting grabbed me right away. Yeah, it's very unpredictable. Like, how do you approach your songwriting?
Well, because I always say we live in the shadows as a band, I approach it as freely as possible. Every song's a new arrow hitting some new target. So I don't have a formula. It's just really like by feel.
Okay.
I do. Yeah. I mean, there is no formula.
Right. So it's very intuitive.
It's completely intuitive. I try to forget about all I know, everything about music I've ever learned. To me, I'm always working at it because I love it. It keeps me young and fresh to be a musician. It's amorphous. It lives in the air. It's vibrations. It could change a whole room of people and make them clap. Not a lot of things will do that. You don't get that at the deli when you're waiting for a sandwich. You just get the sandwich, eat it, and you forgot about it. This is something that people don't forget about. It haunts them in a good way or bad way. So I put in the hours, and I do feel like a band like us as a cumulative like exercise, there's that Japanese 60,000 hours, you become a master. We're becoming masters of freeform, yet concrete creation of music, which is once we start getting bored, it's over. So it could be 3 minutes, could be 6 minutes, but there's no it doesn't have to be a Ramones time set. As right when the point where there's diminished returns, we stop the song. But up until that point, we want to feel like it's a journey that you've never been on, but yet it sounds familiar because it's human. But it's not pulling from anywhere. It has to haunt me. I have to come back 2 days later and want to come back to it. If I don't want to come back to it, it's not worth it. So there's no need. Yet we put a record out a year now. So it's a mixture of sort of deadlines but disregarding things that don't haunt you the next day. And so if I had to say there was a formula, I'd be lying. I know that there's relative minors and majors. I know that if you're playing an A, an F sharp minor would be great. But you may just want to modulate immediately because the lyric is lifting up. How we work together, because we don't have a lot of time together, I will have a skeletal structure of the song. Here's the beginning, here's the end, here's me playing. And then the band intuitively just drums and basses and keyboards start flying around, and before you know it, we're happy. And if we're not happy, we put the song aside and put it on Patreon for people that just want to hear stuff. And we also believe in the record. We don't believe in single dropping. I think that's a waste. If you like a single a lot and that's all you get, it's an appetizer without the meal and the dessert. So we like to just make a record. It feels really good to make a full 10 to 12 songs. So but we don't have a process, but we do have those hours in. After 35 years and 15 records, those 60,000 hours, we're just about there. Okay, so how have we been surviving this long? We're not a mass attack band where every radio station picks us up, right? So it's a 10 to 20 listen, and then it's really rewarding. So I see us as a rabbit hole band. We're like the ultimate rabbit hole band. But I also find Genesis that way. I only knew Abacab and Duke up 10 years ago. I was like in my 40s, and their drummer loved Lamb and disregarded the post Peter Gabriel era. And he after knowing him for 30 years, he said, "How dare you not know Lamb and Nursery Crime?" And so I'm in the club you're in of finding the Mommyheads now. I found Peter Gabriel Genesis as a 41-year-old or a 42-year-old. And there's nothing wrong with that. I see it, we get fans one at a time. Literally, they literally come up to us at the show and they go, "Holy mackerel, that was amazing." But 10 of them leave saying nothing, And I know that they were confused or they didn't like it. But that one comes up, and then we have beers all night. And then that person goes on Facebook, and so they're meaningful clicks and they're meaningful friends and fans. Nobody with us doesn't know us personally. And yeah, sure, we have a bunch of Facebook people, but I can guarantee you, they've been to a show, they've felt it. And it's the same way I felt about becoming obsessed with the early Gabriel era Genesis. I didn't have to meet them, but I really did a deep dive into it. I had to force myself to like Lamb. My first 20 listens I didn't get in, I couldn't figure it out. And the 21st listen on, I was obsessed, and it's one of my favorite records now. Because there's so many layers to that onion, or artichoke, or however you want to put it. And the outer parts of the artichoke taste terrible. I try to get my kids to eat artichoke. They're like, "Ew, I got to scrape it with my teeth." But once you get to that center nugget, it's like the best thing ever. And those are the bands that last your lifetime. So we're a band that lasts full lifetime for people that know us. We're not the type of band where, oh yeah, it was that band from the 90s, and the sound is not so in now because it's so 90s. Our 80s music sounds like it was just made. Literally just made yesterday. And the way I know that is these 20-year-old DJs call and they say, "When did you record this?" It reminds me of all these bands they start talking about that are in their 20s. That means that music is not dated, it's timeless. And I say this without any real ego. I'm saying it factually because conversation after conversation. Whereas if that same 20-year-old heard Kaja Gugu, they would go, that sounds so 80s, or Adam and the Ants, who I adore. They would go, oh, it sounds so early 80s. With us, we skim. It's just one of those things. Like, we don't have a time period. And so it hurts us and helps us. If people get into our catalog, they realize this never lands in a year or a date. And that to me is just regular music. It's not geared towards being no depression, grunge, metal, where you can date it. You can't, there's no timestamp. So I'm proud of that. I'm not proud of it financially. There's no financial rewards to that. We all have day jobs, but I'm proud of the fact that the music has no timestamp.
So tell me about the rest of the band. You've all been together since high school then?
The keyboardist and drummer and I met each other while I was in high school, and they had graduated. We met at CBGB's. Our first show together on a stage, we opened for Crowded House at CB's. It was their first tour. We thought we were good. They got on stage and played, and then we said, wow, we have to get way better. That was the best show I've ever seen, and still is.
Neil Finn's amazing. He's an amazing songwriter. You know Neil Finn?
That was 88. Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The bass player I met in 99 on a solo project, and he really fully joined in 2010, 2009. And our new fill-in for our keyboard player, who's feels part of the band, is 3 years in. Mm-hmm. Who mm-hmm. his favorite band was the Mommyheads. Mommyheads, Todd Rundgren, and Frank Zappa, and started working with me at my job. And as a fan of the Mommyheads, that was the no resume. I just hired Jackie, and when our keyboardist was taking care of his dad, who's 104, he's a caregiver in Cape Cod, I was like, Jackie, would you like to play with us? And it's been amazing to have someone whose top 3 bands is the Mommyheads play at the Mommyheads. So I always joke around, if it was Metallica looking for a keyboard player, there'd be millions of resumes thrown around. We only have one fan in that zone, and that person's in the band. So, but yeah, 3 of us have known each other since 88, 89.
And what's the chemistry like? Because I know as a musician myself, that's the hardest thing, is finding other band members where you really get along great. And when you find it, you don't want to let it go. That's for sure.
We love each other.
Mm-hmm.
We really look out for each other. We're always concerned about each other. There's friction. The biggest friction sometimes is what to do artistically. Sometimes we have arguments about how we approach the world and politics. Are we doing enough for the environment? Or, the keyboard player doesn't want to get on planes anymore. He doesn't want, Michael Holt doesn't want to get on buses and doesn't want to pollute. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't want to tour. Mm-hmm. And so we had to get a fill-in at that point. And we've had long discussions, but it's never, the music really binds us. I know it sounds like Star Wars, but it really brings us together, that desire to play this music, to make this music. And when you've gone down this road for 35 years, for this type of music, CBGB's meets San Francisco, like the band grooviness meets Elliot's Sharp, and Gang of Four, England, like, and it all like that culmination from that time period. We are the only ones who make this music. There's no one else like this left. And even like our people from our generation that we used to play with, Posies, Jellyfish, Camper Van Beethoven, Cake, bands that we came up with, they had their own version. Nobody could make Cake. They make Cake. Camper Van Beethoven is a sound. It was like slacker rock that was intelligent and gorgeous, and no one does that. So they have to get together once a year and do a little tour. And we are the same way. For what we do, we're it. So we almost, and I say this with no ego, we have to stay together. We feel like for the love of each other and for historical reasons, so that just like our new keyboard guitarist, who is a fan and was born in 92 or 93, who's half our age, I want to play to that person who just hears Todd Rundgren and Zappa and goes, those are my people. Mm-hmm. And they will connect with us, and they will see us on stage without laptops, playing our instruments and doing that in our sort of formula, which also is very XTC, English pop. We know that we need to keep doing this as long as possible. And also, the dark truth is, two of our members have passed away. Our first drummer passed away in 2007, and Rick Wilson, who played on a couple of songs in the early 90s, just passed away. So we're not getting any younger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry to hear about that.
Yeah. There's something about when you're in a room and the energy connects completely, 100%. And you can feel the audience, you can feel the temperature of the audience, and you can feel the room. That's the moment we shift in the birds. When there's 1,000 birds in the sky and they pivot, you're like, how did that happen? We never did that with other bands of our generation, but we can do that in a room with 100 people. We can pivot together. We could feel that we need to take it down to a slower song. We could feel that we need to keep it intense with some early New York grit, 89, 90, 91, where urination wasn't in public, wasn't illegal yet, like when you could buy a brownstone in the Lower East Side for back taxes and $1. There was that just angry nastiness. We know when we can all pivot in that room together. That's when I feel like it's necessary for us to do this. And after the show, people are like, I never heard this before. What's going on? And I'm like, well, I can't tell you what we are or what we do, but you just were there with us and you're part of it. And I'm not a big drum circle guy. I don't want to sit around and, I'm not one of those people that wants to sit at a cookout and talk about my feelings necessarily. But in that moment, in that room for an hour, it's so raw and honest. And it's so magical. And there's no ego and there's nothing. Everybody's hangups are gone. Whatever they were worried about when they walked in, whatever we were worried about, it's gone for an hour. And so do I need to tour? No. But do those moments matter to us? And does it matter to anyone who comes to the merch table and talks to me and said, wow, holy smoke, that was really great. I never knew I don't know what that was, but it was great. That is the moment where I go, I think it's great to play some shows here and there. If we could do 15 to 20 a year, it's worth it.
What's your read of how people are reacting to live music and after that, 2-year lockdown or whatever it was?
For a moment, we toured during COVID in Sweden. They had a different policy.
Oh.
They lost a lot of their grandparents, a lot. But we went there in 2021. We had a tour with a band called Eggstone. It's a historical band that had a studio called Tambourine Studios, and they produced every Swedish big act ever, like Cardigans onward. And there were 800 people in one of the shows, but they couldn't move. They were sitting in benches. If someone got up, someone said, sit down. It was strange, but there was a sense of euphoria. But I think we're back to normalcy, and I think people want to get out of their houses. There's a lot of scientific proof that right now I know my ears are behind my eyes, but because you're not in front of me, your brain is working harder to add depth to this field here. And so if you do 3 Zooms in a row, like I'll do for work, you're exhausted. You're exhausted mentally, and you need to close your eyes and take a nap because you're making up for the depth of field. When you're in front of me, that's when the depth of field is natural. It's thousands of years of human evolution. It just kicks in, and you're not exhausted. You're invigorated because you're actually sitting across from me. And so people come out to shows and they want to be up against each other again because it's not exhausting, it's invigorating. And I see this with the economy. People don't want to go back to work, but when they do, especially Manhattan with little shoebox apartments, they're like, wow, I really miss this. And there's a part of your brain that's less exhausted by being in front of the person and smelling them and seeing the beads of sweat and seeing what's below. There's I love music with harmonic chaos where there's not just tick, 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 4 chords, but there's opposing dissonance, and it's the whole band together creates a chord, but it's sort of rubbing. To me, that's like when you walk in nature, every leaf is different, and there's billions of them as you walk in nature, and that's calming because that chaos calms you. You realize I'm just an animal, And when you walk with buildings that are straight, which is unfamiliar to us only with the last, 3, 4, 500 years, especially Manhattan, it's exhausting because we're not used to that. So our brain tries to make up for chaos. We try to create chaos. We try to create a billion leaves. And that's why when I'm listening to music that has depth of field and chaos in it, it brings the leaves back to my urban environment. And I also want our music to do that, because I know a lot of people listen on trains and cars and houses with walls. And I want our music to be all those billions of chaotic nature things. Worms crawling. You can see a worm crawling with your periphery vision as you walk. The 95% of your brain you don't use feels that worm crawling. You don't really want to pay attention to it, but it calms you. The bees and so that's why I want our music to do for urban dwellers and people that live in houses and that are on Zooms 24/7. I want us to bring some really rich chaos, melodic, harmonic chaos. And I know it sounds highfalutin, but it's actually a very something I desire to listen to.
Well, you're probably aware of Steven Wilson, and he's been doing these mixes. There's like 14 or something. The speakers are all split. The sound is all split up. There seems to be this desire to get away from stereo and get a totally surround sound thing. What are your thoughts on that?
I could take it or leave it. I feel like, what's the music? If the music is a band that has 5 kick drums and they're going and they're singing about goblins, it doesn't matter if the sound's behind me or ahead of me, But if it's like if it's the band singing The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, and it's just this mayonnaise and mustard and this like gush and mud and and it's just like all things are just mushing together to make this soulful, wrenching, gut wrenching. I don't even know if they knew what they were singing about, but God, it feels like they were there and they were reporting on the Civil War. They were just reporters, and nobody's playing. They're all great musicians, but they realize they're just part of this paste. Who cares if it's behind me or in front of me? It can be mono. I actually go with Brian Wilson, who's mono. The best things ever made was probably the Pet Sound mixes, where he's giving you depth of field with one speaker. He's putting you in the room somehow. And with the least amount of technology ever. He probably had 2 faders, but he's putting you in that room and you're there, and there's Hal Blaine and there's, Carol Kay. And he's giving you this depth of field with one speaker, and the same way the band were reporters in the Civil War, they're giving you depth of field with emotion. Who cares about technology at that point? I could take it or leave it, because I literally feel like I'm on the battlefield with the band, with 2 speakers. So I can take it or leave it. I feel like it's, we have a thing with musicians with like amp simulators, and then you're deep diving and the crowd's waiting and you're going, I think I want a Fender Tweed, and and the band's waiting. Just get a Fender Tweed.
Yeah, it's amazing. You've lived through, well, you've had a privileged life in a sense, because you've been in the business pre-internet. You've gone, you were in the business when there was already the turmoil and they were starting to give away free songs on the internet, stuff like that. And then, of course, now everything, how it's all changed and how the record companies have reemerged, that they're doing these 360 deals. And it just seems to be going back to the old, you're a musician, you're going to get screwed, like Spotify paying micro pennies. What are your impressions about how everything has changed from when you started out to today?
Get a day job. Don't rely on what makes your heart beat faster to make money. If you make art, if you're an artist, whatever that means, where you're pouring your guts out and hoping that it's the same story of someone else out there, and that you will connect to someone in Des Moines or Canada or New York or LA or Istanbul, that they feel something, get a day job, make the best possible art you could make. What is that? That is where you can listen to it and feel like, wow, that's all of me, and that's more of me. That's the human condition. You can't conjure up the human condition in 3 minutes I think, properly if you're gunning for $1 million deal, or if you're looking at the Billboard's top 100. What you're going to do is replicate what's on the top 100. This has been the case forever. That's why we've had sugar, sugar, bum, 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 bum. It's not really a gut wrench. It's not going to change anybody's life. It's something. And now we have, I call it retail rock, where you're buying socks and underwear and you can't decide if it's black socks or white socks. And there's music in the background and it's pop. It's called retail rock. And that's music made to make money. It's not the music I want to own. In terms of like where the industry is, yeah, there was great stuff in the 80s and 90s. We got a $500,000 deal, and it was like a 7-record deal from Geffen. It was like the biggest thing that week. We were the biggest thing. What we did was make, I thought, a great record, but subpar for what we could have done. It was a good record with some really good songs on it. Money confuses people. People don't understand what money is. It's really just a trading system. They think that more is better. And now we have a system that's horrible if you want to make a living, but you also have Bandcamp. On Fridays, they give you everything. So I think we're going back to, instead of microwaving everything, which we did in the 90s, we're back to oven and, frying it over a fire. Instead of relying on electricity and money, and they were banks essentially, all the record labels were banks just loaning. You didn't own anything. Now you could own it, and you make the fire, and that's your pan, and you're cooking up that food. So get a day job if you're a musician or an artist, enough to support what your art, and just make the best art possible. And if you have one view, it's not a big deal. There are a lot of bands with hundreds of thousands of views or millions of views, but they're not real views to be. They're views because they ended up somewhere by accident, like some weird random playlist, because it had the name Puppy in it. And they got 1 million overnight, and their band thinks they're going to have more than 10 people at their audience. There are bands with millions of views that can't get 100 people to a show. That's odd. Its optics are twisted. And you want to be that artist that the views are earned, and you know who those viewers are because they're commenting. And then you're back to a real connection through the internet to people that really need that in their lives. Every time I write music, I'm like, do people need this? Like, they're already cluttered with stuff. Well, sometimes they say they do, and that's all I need to hear. Labels will force them to listen to it. Labels will send you email after email until you're like, okay, I'd rather have people that want to listen to us and want to listen to an artist out there that is judging whether they should do it without a label, without this, without that. You could book your own shows. You could do your own publishing deal. You could sync your own music into films. You could do it all if you have the attention span and the wherewithal. That's what we've done.
So everybody, the links to Mommyheads is going to be below. And anything else you wanted to share? Of course, there's a Bandcamp page, is your homepage. Anything else you wanted to wrap up with?
Yeah, Bandcamp's great. Patreon's great. We put up stuff there for $1 a month. We'll stay in touch with you and send you new songs. We just got back from Sweden, 10 shows. It was awesome, and we're going to play New York, Philly, Boston, DC, and Beacon next week, the 20th to the 24th. So come on out, and it's mommyheads.com. If you want to go down a rabbit hole of 35 years of music, it's a major rabbit hole, and it's okay if you don't know us. We understand.
Well, I'm hoping, I'm very grateful to discover your band. I love your philosophy about how you're approaching things. I think it's very cool that it's somehow intertwined with prog rock, because there's a lot of prog fans in this channel. So I'm sure we're going to arouse some curiosity about your music. And once again, I really enjoyed it. I gave it a good score, and I look forward to going into your back catalog and look forward to doing another interview on your next album.
I appreciate the time.
Okay. So thanks a lot, Andy. Or sorry, thanks a lot, Adam. I'll edit that out. That's the nice thing about this. I can edit.
I get called everything, but I'll take Adam for now.
Okay. So thanks a lot, Adam. Have a great day.
Take care.
Okay. See you later.